We'll go ahead and kick things off. So good morning. Thank you for joining Epic River and Aprio. Today we'll be talking about educating your customers to reduce your risks. To give you some background, Epic River, we've actually been working with lenders since 2005 with our e-sign solution, ProSign. We've been heavily relied upon during the first phase of the SBA PPP loans. And have developed a solution for the application submission process. Obviously, the complexity of the application and the ever-changing guidelines, we needed a tool that could easily guide our lenders and could serve every application and create consistent data for audits and really protect the lenders from risks of the SBA loans. So our hope today is to discuss the importance of automated process to submit your PPP applications with Epic River and the steps you can take to mitigate risk with Aprio. So we have a few people on the call. I'm with Epic River as the account executive, and then we have Norm Woolworth, our Director of Customer Success. He's here to discuss our SBA PPP forgiveness module and highlight the key features that make Epic River module an end-to-end PPP solution. Norm, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Alex mentioned, I run customer success here at Epic River on our ProSign online product, which hopefully some of you out there use, and also our patient lending product, and now currently our PPP module that we'll be discussing today. I think it's a really exciting complementary solution that Justin and over at Aprio and us here at Epic River can provide, and looking forward to educating you on it today.
Awesome. Thanks, Norm. We also have on the call Justin Elangen, CPA and assurance partner with Aprio, an award-winning top 50 CPA advisory firm. Justin will be fielding some questions regarding the lender's risk and a solution that can be deployed in unison with Epic River to counter some of the identified risks we'll be speaking about. Justin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Alex, Norm, and Lindsay as well, and everybody at Epic River, and for having us participate and really forming, this collaborative partnership here to really provide some solutions for lenders and how to navigate, the loan forgiveness process. Certainly as frequently as it's been changing over the last 4 months, and indications that there may be some further changes coming, whether that's another round, changes to eligibility, and other things that are being discussed right now by Congress, allowing additional support for hospitality and things of that nature. So it's been very fluid and very important, and you're going to hear a lot of that today. To kind of work backward a little bit about our involvement as Aprio, and then how that formed together with Epic River. Our focus is, so we're a CPA firm. We're headquartered out of Atlanta, Georgia. Offices primarily on the East Coast, but servicing clients in every state in the country and 40 countries around the globe. About 600 or so employees. And PPP for us was really a opportunity for liquidity solutions for our clients as they were dealing with the impacts of COVID-19. And that's the perspective you'll hear a lot of from me today is, what are your customers dealing with? What are the risks they're facing? What are the things that they're addressing that ultimately could have some impact and perhaps significant impact at that related to you as well as the lender. And so as you see here, we're working together with Epic River on various components of the forgiveness process, whether that's educating their customers to prepare them for forgiveness, or providing solutions as it relates to the forgiveness process in receipt of application, document transmittal, coordination with the SBA, et cetera. So look forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin. So we'll kind of get things kicked off. For everybody that's watching, feel free to submit any questions that you may have, and we'll review them towards the end of the webinar. We may try to address them midway. Justin touched on this. We founded this partnership a few weeks ago when we realized really the need. The lender requirements and the responsibilities are greatly alleviated by Epic River's module, but we realized there were still some sticking points, specifically around lender liability and the tools lenders have to be able to deploy to reduce these liabilities. So Justin, maybe you can go into a little bit more why this partnership makes sense.
Sure, I'll be glad to. So, the couple of things, Alex, you touched on it there. The solution of a platform and a process and a systems, and by no means do I want to understate how significant those are. They are going to be greatly impactful in being successful, and frankly, being more successful as a lender than we were during receipt of the loan applications on the front end, right? That was kind of a mad rush, happened very quickly. I can say in speaking with banks of all sizes and across the country, I don't think anybody wants to go through the loan forgiveness application process in the same way they went through the loan origination process. And so really equipping us with tools to go about that effectively. And so what we're really dealing with now from a risk standpoint is really broken down into a couple of areas. As I mentioned, the loan application process certainly had some challenges, both for lenders and borrowers alike, with it being new, with there being a lack of guidance from the SBA, and with it happening so quickly. And so one of the things as we prepare for the loan forgiveness application process is focusing on the customer experience, right? There are a lot of relationships that are being improved upon, a lot of relationships that will be changing as a result of the PPP process. And that's at varying sizes based on the experiences they are or aren't having with their bank. And so one of these concepts from a lender specific perspective is providing that customer support to provide a better experience to your customers for a long-standing relationship beyond this. And certainly those that have made loans to borrowers that were not existing clients, right? This is your first real touch point with some of those folks. And so starting with a superb experience is going to bode well for the future. The other aspect of this too, though, from a customer standpoint, is the more tools that they are equipped with increases their ability to understand the program, understand their requirements, whether that's what's an eligible cost or what documents do I need to be gathering along the way. Because at the end of the day, garbage in, garbage out, right, as we look at the loan forgiveness application. And so how can we prevent that and be proactive to provide the customers the right tools, resources, et cetera, so that what they provide to you when they apply for loan forgiveness is exactly as you'd like to see it. It's accurate, it's complete, and it's thorough, thereby reducing the time that your organization, your financial institution would be spending in reviewing it, in follow-up back and forth. And not to say that those won't happen, but at least we can reduce those to the extent possible. And so to reduce some risk there as it relates to time, as well as reducing the time spent fielding phone calls, right? I'm sure you've all received a lot of calls from your borrowers trying to understand particular nuances of a program. But, as you think about safe harbors, for example, that raises a ton of questions. FTE calculations raises even more questions. And we understand that there are challenges as a lender here because we are in a position where to manage our risks appropriately, we don't want to be providing guidance. But yet your customers need it, and they need to get that information accessible in some way, shape, or form to provide you, again, an accurate loan forgiveness application. So that's a big focus of kind of where we're coming into play, being in a position of working with borrowers and now with lenders all across the country, is to kind of help solve that issue. And then really the last one is thinking about, well, what happens if this doesn't work out that way? What if they do submit something wrong? What if, even us as a lender weren't educated or caught in error from an issue from a loan forgiveness application that was submitted, right? We know what our responsibilities are that have been outlined by the SBA. If this goes wrong, this is, and it has been, will continue to be a debt instrument, right? And so this is now something you're going to be carrying on your books beyond 8 or 24 weeks, depending on what that cycle looks like for your customers. That requires servicing a 1% interest loan for 5 years, and ongoing compliance, regulatory compliance with the SBA. And I think we're all in a position where that's something that nobody really has a great appetite for. Certainly those that have not been SBA lenders before are certainly not looking to continue this process beyond what's required. And again, the more we can increase forgiveness, the better support is better for you as a lender, but then the more support you're providing to your customers and the small businesses. So long answer, Alex, but there's a lot in there as it relates to risks.
Well, you touched on a little bit with the documentation on the lender side. Would you be able to kind of expand on what type of documentation process is needed to be done by the lender?
Sure. So that the documentation is a great one, and that's a fantastic solution that the Epic River's platform is putting together, and I'll let Norm speak to that in further detail. But the documentation, as we look at it, right, it's going to cover effectively anything going into the application. That's broken down into two aspects of documentation that's required by our borrower to be submitted with their loan forgiveness application, as well as a series of documents that must be maintained. And then those may perhaps be requested by the lender or the SBA. Certainly we know loans over 2 million are going to get some additional review by the SBA. Understanding what's needed, what's required, having a process, again, not just as the lender, and we're going to talk about that, but making sure the borrowers have a process too, because they want to be tracking this information as they go so they can provide a complete package to you. Norm, I want to throw that at this point, I want to throw that over to you, because I think the solution that you guys have put together is tremendously helpful in guiding a borrower through that part of the process.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I agree. I think that is one of the biggest benefits that we can provide. Obviously, with the guidelines that came out last week, as a lender, you are responsible for confirming that all the proper supporting documentation has been included with the application. And so a few things that a module like Epic Rivers can provide is that we automatically ask for specific documentation based off of the answers to the question. So, for example, if the borrower fills out that they made mortgage interest payments during the period, if they populate a number in that field, that will automatically ask that borrower to upload a mortgage statement as supporting documentation, similar to utility payments. And so having the ability to automatically ask borrowers for those documents instead of having to go through a manual process is, I think, very valuable. Will reduce the work, reduce the phone calls to your office, and also increase the accuracy in the first place. In addition to that, if there ever is any additional documentation that is required that the borrower did not originally submit, the Epic River module provides the ability to electronically request additional documents that will send an email notification. And I think that goes back to a point Justin was making a little while ago, which is, I think, one of the most important ways in which you as a lender can reduce your risks is to have a standardized process in place for reviewing applications. And again, a module, Epic Rivers module, has really promotes and supports a standardized process for you as a lender for review. So there's built-in communication between lenders reviewing applications. There's the ability to request additional documentation. There's the ability to update statuses to say when something is when an application is ready to be submitted to the SBA. And kind of, again, on that piece, we'll take it all the way to the end for you and actually submit the application and the supporting documentation to the SBA, and then return that response back from the SBA. So that's all right there in the module that, you'll be able to see and keep that process really tight, which is, I think, really important in this scenario.
Yeah, I think the organizational aspect is big, and speaking with certain lenders as we're going through this process, depending on the involvement and understanding of a borrower, right? If let's say they didn't use mortgage interest as an eligible cause for forgiveness just because they didn't need it. They covered it in payroll. But you look at the standard documentation requirements, if you think about the SBA instructions, and it's going to go ahead and tell you, well, I need your February 2020 statement because we need to prove existence before February 15th. It's going to ask for amortization schedules. It's going to ask for debt statements. Well, does a borrower need to spend their time gathering it? And does you as a lender really want all of this information that provides no value in the loan forgiveness process? And so having a organized and defined way of going about that is going to be tremendously helpful to minimize your time to the extent that we can, and also increase some organization and ability to expedite the loan forgiveness process.
That's great. That's great. So why should the lender be concerned about the borrower keeping up with the changing guidance?
It's a great question. So as we're all trying to keep up, I should say, with the changing guidance, borrowers, lenders, advisors, you name it. Sometimes I feel that the SBA is trying to keep up with their own guidance. So, but really from a lender standpoint, again, I think the big thing here is in being a support system, right? And being, specifically as we're thinking more so in the community banks, in the credit unions, right? Not to say that in the national scale that customer relationships are not as important, but it's a different experience, right? And that's, in often cases, that's why your customers are with a community bank or a credit union. And this continues to focus on that, again, as being a support system for them. But beyond that, really, it's ensuring the accuracy here, because as we look at this, the way that the guidance is stipulated for a lender, they have 60 days to review and provide a determination to the SBA on forgiveness. But that doesn't even start until they've received a complete application. And so if you want to really think about it from the lender perspective on avoiding the additional calls, what's the status? Where am I? Why do we have this back and forth? I thought I gave you everything I needed. That's really, again, pushing that forward so that the borrower has the resources, the tools available to them to provide a complete package, to provide it accurately, and to really understand all the nuances, because it seems that it changed. I mean, this is probably the longest we've been without new guidance coming out for a borrower, right? I don't think we've seen anything now since I believe it was June 25th, which feels like forever ago. So obviously that means something's bound to happen. But as things continue to change, making sure that they understand the changes along with you.
I think that's key. This covers a wide spectrum of borrowers, and being able to have ways to guide them all individually makes a big difference. So with that being said, what is the best time to start focusing on the borrower education?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Yeah.
I really can't stress that one enough. We have, there's certainly conversations we have at different stages of when as we're working with lenders throughout this process, as we're working with borrowers directly, the later we wait to educate them, the more they're working backward to figure out what activity has transpired, right? The earlier set of these funds were dispersed in the first half of April. And so if you think about some of those, and depending on the record keeping, right, of each of your customers, that may be quite a process for them to work backward through to figure out what happened, what didn't. And maybe they spent their money unintentionally on something that didn't qualify, or the rules changed, right? Like owner's compensation is a perfect example where we didn't see changes, specifically as we're thinking about our C&S Corporation borrowers, until the middle of June. Well, that was 2 months after the fact that they were already spending. So the later that it becomes that they realize, wait a second, you mean that I couldn't pay over $20,833 to an owner, that can be problematic. And so understanding the timing, getting these tools in their hand as quickly as possible is important. And then further, as we see with the guidance from the SBA last Friday, I guess they technically like to say that they did it the night before. So last Thursday night, we'll give them credit for that, was this notification to lenders that they were going to open their forgiveness application portal on August the 10th. As a borrower, and as somebody who's advising borrowers, I should say, I can speak to the fact that they are chomping at the bit to get an application submitted. They've spent the money. They want this off their books. They may have to make a change in personnel in the upcoming future, and they don't want that to reduce forgiveness, so they need to get their application in as soon as possible. And so they're, you better believe that they know August 10th as well. It's not just a secret for the lenders. And so they're looking at that. And by the time they get to filling out an application, if that's the first time they're really understanding all the intricacies of the Paycheck Protection Program, that's hard to kind of come back to and figure out, well, how do I unwind what's already been done? And so I can encourage that to begin, if it hasn't already started, as with extreme urgency.
Absolutely.
If I could jump in there, just on another timing piece, more on the lender side than the borrower side. But I think, with all the ambiguity out there right now, it's tough to start taking those first steps forward in terms of what to get there in the first place. And I think the one thing that you can really start doing from a lender's point of view right now is establish those processes. And however that's manual and however that is, electronically supported, getting that system in place, because as Justin alluded to, there is going to be an onslaught when that August 10th date comes, whether or not the final guidelines are out or not. And if there's still changes to come. And if you're not ready with a process in place for how you're going to handle those, how you're going to be reviewing them, how you're going to be passing them off between different staff, and getting them submitted and reviewed, that's going to really be a difficult thing to quickly ramp up. So in this coming week or weeks, really establishing that process and knowing what solution you want to use as a lender, I think is going to be extremely important.
Yeah, we have a dwindling timeline. So, there are some really complicated pieces to this application. And I guess what are a few of the most complicated components of the forgiveness process in the application for borrowers?
Sure. So, and I'll add a plug here to encourage usage of the Q&A box for those in the audience, because I'm sure you have some where you're dealing with certain issues or questions that have been posed to yourselves, to your relationship managers that you're getting from customers, and say, I just don't know how to handle this. Even if I knew the answer, I'm not sure how to respond, or can I respond? So please feel free to use those so we can, and we'll be happy to incorporate those into this conversation and provide some guidance for you in that regard. But as it relates to the process, right? I think certainly as we see this, the calculating aspect in and of itself is following this instructions, right? We can get there, we can do math. It's understanding the details behind it. And knowing that that's one of the requirements from a lender standpoint, is making sure it's calculated correctly. Again, maybe stepping away from a paper application would help, right? That it reduces processing time if that's been automated, because there are a number of calculations that are embedded throughout the application process. From the borrower standpoint, before it ever even makes its way onto an application, I think we could probably all agree on FTEs as being one of those areas that has some complexities to it, right? I mean, depending on the size of an organization, we're looking at a employee by employee, week by week. Oh, and by the way, there's 2 ways to calculate it, and you have multiple reference periods to compare to. So just because of the availability of options and the frequency of tracking the data in and of itself, that I think that makes it probably the most complicated aspect. I'll say we're working side by side with a lot of payroll service providers, as well as they continue to develop and enhance certain PPP specific reporting to supplement a forgiveness application. And I won't name names here, but I can tell you even some of the largest payroll providers in the country, even within their algorithms, they're having challenges calculating FTEs. So I certainly say that that's probably a key area here of where things could go awry.
Oh, thanks, Justin. Norm, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Justin. Is that maybe being the most complicated piece? I think overall, he kind of touched on there for a second about the importance of having an electronic, form that can kind of help you through the process. So far, I've talked more about the lender side and the benefits to you all, but also in terms of the benefits to the borrowers. I'm actually going to share my screen really quick, Alex, if you don't mind. All right, so if you see over here, for example, this is our questionnaire within our module. It's a very clear and straightforward way of determining if the borrower is eligible to use the easy form or if they're required to use the full 3508. So, they can just simply answer one question and we know, hey, that means they're eligible for the easy. When you come up here and if, they want to maybe use an alternate covered period and they can click on a little learn more help box to, help them understand what that is. All that information that you can provide and that ease of use that you can give to the borrower is one, it's going to improve your customer satisfaction and make your customers happier with you. But more importantly, even it's going to reduce the number of phone calls you're getting, the number of times where you're asked to provide guidance, which I know is a position that as a lender you don't want to be in. And so the more straightforward you can make this, as opposed to just giving them a paper form, where you can just drop in the numbers in boxes. And then, hey, on our side, again, as Justin was saying, the calculations, I mean, if you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of applications out there, in a module, in our module, we automatically do the calculations for the borrower. You're not relying on any of them to do that math themselves. And as those guidelines just came out last week, again, that's another one of those things that, lenders are responsible to review, is to making sure those calculations are accurate. So, we can mitigate one of those variables right off the bat.
Excellent. So guys, that kind of brings us to really what should lenders have in place with the August 10th submission date rapidly approaching?
So I think the couple of things there, and it's a loaded question there, Alex. I think the primary points here are, one, a communication plan with your borrowers. Understanding, just because August 10th is available, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be accepting applications by August 10th. Or maybe your date is August 1st, or maybe you're already accepting applications today. So I think the communication aspect, being proactive about that, will help alleviate significant numbers of phone calls and time spent. So I think that is I can't emphasize that one enough. And we understand that that's happening differently at different organizations. There are several banks we're working with that are doing it in phases, right? And understanding based on where a borrower may be, what their expectations are of, hey, I need to apply in August or September or October. It really just depends. I think there's a lot of communication aspect that is really, really important, just on timing. Just, something even we think might be simple. That is a really, really big one right now. Then the other one, again, the guidance aspect of it, making sure a borrower knows what to complete before they get to the application. Having them be, truly prepared for that is big. And so how, where are they? Where are your borrowers in that process? Do you know that as a lender as to how have their questions been answered so that they can satisfactorily complete the loan forgiveness application at the appropriate time? And then really the big one, I think, is a systems and a process. We certainly don't want this to be in a the implementation of and interpretations of some of the guidance may be very specific to facts and circumstances. The loan forgiveness application process and review really should, I think, be a one size fits all. And Norm, I'll kind of let you provide some context. Hopefully you're in agreement there with that process. But I think, and certainly speaking from a background of as an audit partner within Aprio, we love systems and processes and controls. They're fantastic. And I would be more than inclined to think that our financial institutions do too. Norm, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to repeat myself too much. I know I've already brought it up a couple of times so far, but I definitely do think that's the most important piece to get in place is who's going to be doing what system you're going to be using, who's going to be making that final approval for submission to SBA, and just what electronic, what electronic system you're going to be using to be doing that, I think is by far the most important piece. I also think that, as Justin referenced, communicating with borrowers and making sure that they know what to expect and how your bank's going to be handling it. You don't want your borrower to be doing double work. You don't want them to, be downloading the 3508 off the government website and starting to fill it out themselves. But then you're going to be using an electronic solution, 3 weeks after that, making them kind of redo work they've already done. So just communicating with, when you're going to start accepting, are you going to have an electronic solution for them? I think those are those important pieces to get ahead of now.
Norm, it's funny you say that. Just yesterday, I had one of our clients send me a PDF copy of an SBA application, not realizing their bank wasn't going to take a copy of the actual SBA application. And so all the time that they spent running the calculations, putting it together, putting it into the document, was time I think that they would wish they would have back. What I would say as it relates to that, and we've produced a variety of tools associated with this, is knowing what's going to be needed for your application is really important. Knowing what those numbers are. Maybe it's not completing the application because you're using, or they'll be using a portal, that you guys are providing on their behalf to facilitate that transmittal and that process. But at least from the borrower standpoint, having them in a position where they know what's coming, right? There's a lot of strategy involved in when to submit an application based on certain circumstances that their businesses may be dealing with as it relates to, where's their revenue stand today? Are they earning enough revenue and not only earning it, but collecting from a cash flow perspective to continue to maintain workforce? Because that may change the timing and the sensitivity around timing of wanting to apply for loan forgiveness. So really understanding the intricacies of a business is pretty important. And again, that's really where that customer experience is really going to come into play. I don't foresee an environment where a lender wants to be sitting side by side in this situation per se, wants to be sitting side by side talking about strategy and when to apply. Because the biggest risk that can come back from that conversation is, well, you told me to do it this way, and now I submitted my application to you, and maybe guidance changed somewhere in the middle and the borrower wasn't aware. Or maybe the advice that was given was incorrect because we didn't understand the full extent of their facts and circumstances. And now, after submitting an application to you, you may only make a decision that you want to give them 80% forgiveness based on now having received all the information. That could be really problematic for both the lender and the borrower as it relates to, a cash flow, certainly on the borrower side, but relationship for both parties.
Do you guys have anything else to add?
No, I'll give you kind of first dibs at this one.
Not a whole lot. Just that I think that this is an opportunity for, it's kind of a win or lose where you can either improve and, develop your relationships with your customers further and really let them know that, you have their back and, you're there for them and you're going to try to provide the best and easiest tools possible for them, or you're going to make this process really painful without offering a lot of assistance, without offering electronic tools. And I think that, kind of as a long-term customer satisfaction, piece that this will be really important in the long term. And that, I highly encourage you to think of it in that light, and that this is an opportunity to really win customers for life, because of how well you handled it and how easy you made it for them. And to think about it from that point of view.
Sure. Yeah. I would agree with that. And I'm to take a moment here for those you've heard me mention the tools and the resources. Let me very quickly kind of show you what that looks like, and then also kind of give you some indication of where you can learn more about this. What I'm going to pull forward here on my screen is an example, right? This is the resource center, and this is all specific to the Paycheck Protection Program that we've put together to support that conversation and the needs of customers thereby alleviating some of these challenges faced by you guys as the lenders. So what you'll see here, and this continues to be updated as guidance comes out, as new information comes out, as new needs or concerns arise from those that we're interacting with, whether that's a borrower or a lender. And so what we've put together here, I'll use this. As you can see, we've broken this down by business type, just based on the fact that guidance is different based on the type of entity you may be. Specifically, as we think about owner's compensation, is really a big area where we see some differences. As we look at kind of what does that mean, and I'll just use LLCs and partnerships as my example here. Variety of information. We're going to cover different stages throughout the loan forgiveness process. We've got frequently asked questions documents built. We've got borrower checklists for documentation assembly. And then, of course, the guidance itself as it relates to going through understanding of the program. So this is the educational content. We're going to go into detail on various things here, as we look here of eligible payroll costs and non-payroll costs. Those are kind of our baselines. But then we get into the real details of understanding FTEs. How do the safe harbors work? What are my reference periods? What are the things I need to be considering, as well as exceptions? And then similarly, we do that with wage reductions for everybody here, and Norman and the Epic River team. They provided some solutions. This is kind of your preview into documentation requirements, and so a lot of content available on demand, right, for your customers. And then we'll go into details as well. We've done it by, we've done recordings by industry, because there are certain differences, challenges that a manufacturer is facing may be very different than those of a restaurant. So understanding what goes into that, so that a borrower understands what's important, what's relevant to them, and get their questions answered. I mentioned payroll providers. We've got some instructional tutorials on how to go through how to obtain some PPP specific reporting. And then we've done a variety of resources around, we have 2 versions of a forgiveness calculator to help project, predict, and understand the loan forgiveness process, so that a borrower knows at any point in time where they are, what forgiveness would be, they be eligible for at a various point in time, whether they choose to use actual figures or projected figures, right? So that they know when to apply, when they have the ability to do so. And of course, we're never going to throw an Excel document at you with a bunch of built-in intelligence around it to cover things like owner's compensation limits, cash compensation limits for employees, et cetera. Well, we've put together both written instructions and video tutorials. So, between Aprio and the Epic River solutions here, there's a lot of options to make this easy for the customer, make it easy for the lender. And then again, reduce time. I think that's something we're all looking for, is an ability to increase efficiencies to the extent that we can. Time is the one thing we can't get back, and so we'll use that cliche here because it's really important. And as we look at the volume of these things, and it's all going to be happening in such a short window, building efficiencies, process, procedures, controls, educating your customers are really, really, really important. So I think, if I had what do I want to leave the audience with? That's what that is. This is an evolving process, has been from the beginning. And so as we continue to evolve with it, we continue to educate our customers as we go throughout the changes, because those can make or break decisions as it relates to loan forgiveness. And then, of course, as we've mentioned, 15 times here, but that's that important, processes and procedures as it relates to the loan forgiveness application. And how's that going to be facilitated and securely? There's a lot of security numbers that are going to be flying around here as it relates to payroll, data collection, and things that, could pose significant risks well beyond PPP that need to be evaluated. And so having solutions that, provide that type of data security protection in conjunction with building efficiencies, that's a pretty awesome way to go about the process.
Great explanation, Justin. Really appreciate both you and Norm sharing your insight and tips as the guidance is and things become more clear. If for any of you that would like to explore these options, the Epic River module or Aprio, we will be sending a link. Justin actually has some time set aside if you would like to explore Aprio and the solution that they can provide. I believe it's 2 p.m. Eastern every day for the next week or so. And then we would be able to set up a demo for you as well if you would like to see how this would interface with your system and your solutions that you have in place. Other than that, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And we'll be reaching out to all of you here soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.